Conversations with Love with Eric Shawn. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Love, where we interview real life people. They share their experience of how they've overcome adversities and how they use those experiences to spread love. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Love. Today we are blessed to spend our time with Julie Casey. Julie's actually a very old friend of mine. We've worked together. We've shared a lot of interesting, deep conversations. She has a heart of gold. She has an amazing desire to be of service, to help people. But I'll let her tell your story. But before we get started, I'd like to start with a prayer. Is that okay with you, Julie?
Sure, of course.
God, please allow us to be a vessel of love. Please allow us to be able to receive love and to give love. Allow us to be grounded through this interview, to let the body be ours, the voice be ours, but the words be yours. Please allow our message from our heart to reach somebody else's heart so that we can help facilitate healing. God, thank you for allowing us to go through the experiences of our life that we have gone through. Thanks for walking us through that and giving us the ability to use those unique experiences to help other people. We pray that you continue to use us. Amen.
Amen.
Miss Julie Casey.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, so that my listeners can kind of know who you are.
I guess I could say I'm retired, but I'm not. I'm not out in the workforce. I work from home. I do online personal training right now. I do have a full gym at my house that eventually I hope to be able to have clients here. I love talking. I talk to a lot of people, motivate them in a lot of different things. It's kind of funny. A lot of stuff has come kind of full circle this full week. I've had people reaching out to me, old clients reaching out to me, asking for advice and help with weight loss. Another young lady was reaching out to me. She just turned 31 and she's just realizing that there are toxic people out there and how they affect your life. And she's having problems with actually feeling good about where she's at. So she's going to school, she's getting a full ride for her bachelor's, and she's just exploding. She's changed. She's trying to move away from those toxic people, but yet she feels like bad about it. So, I've got to sit down and have some conversations with her about that. And right now I'm just trying to pull everything together so I can just live my best life, helping people and working from home. And that's pretty much it.
So right now,
it's not that exciting.
Right now, you're probably like 70% of the world working from home. It seems like that's our future for working from home. So I know a little bit about the transition and what's taken place as far as Julie becoming this angel of love. But can you just share? I'd like to hear your story from you. A little bit about what you've gone through and what's gotten you to the point that you realized that you were here to do great things.
There's many different reasons that have made me realize. I realized it more and more this last week. But like you said, I have been through quite a bit. I don't even know where to start. I, grew up an only child, 2 loving parents, a great mom, a wonderful stepdad, and, didn't have a lot of friends in high school. I had a few. I had, little cliques that I kind of hung out with, but no real true friends. I was bullied in school because I was the thicker girl at school. So I was always made fun of. Plus I have, red hair and So high school wasn't my favorite. I never went to parties and hung out. I went to a couple football games and prom. That was about it. And after I graduated, a couple years later, I had moved out from my parents' house, and I had met a young man, and at that time for me, fell in love. And that's where things just kind of started spiraling and changing. I've always been one to want to help people, save people, I guess you could say. And I think that's, now that I look back on it, I think that's what it was. I thought that me helping him and saving him from himself was love. He was very abusive. He was, and I didn't know it when we first started dating, he was using crack. He held it very well from me. He hid it, and became very abusive, and physically, mentally. And that's where a lot of it started. The mental abuse, I think, was worse than the physical abuse, because it's longer lasting. That went on for about 2 years. I was actually ended up being homeless with him. It was during one of the probably coldest winters in Cleveland. We slept in my car for, I can't remember how long during the winter time, or would stay at a friend's place, and just pretty much what the kids call it now, couch surfing. And I just kept trying to save him from that. And a few times he went and he was locked up. And during those times, I'd start to get myself together, and he'd get back out and find me and, tell me he changed and this and that. And, me thinking him being locked up and off the drugs, maybe he did. And yeah, it just didn't happen. The thing that got me out of that situation was I ended up pregnant with my daughter. Yeah, I tell her to this day, she saved my life before she was even born. She's the reason why I left him. I actually, that's a night I'll never forget. I don't know what we were fighting about, but he was putting a good beat down on me, and I was laying on the floor, and he kept kicking me, and I got him to hurt the baby because I had just found out that I was pregnant. And his words to me were, "I won't kill my baby, but I'll kill its mother." And he left. Well, right after he left, I called his sister, and I told her what happened, and she told me to get out of there and to start walking, and she would come and get me. So I waited a few minutes to make sure he was gone, and I left, and she came and got me and took me back to their mother's house. And his mom made sure I wasn't hurt and put me up on her couch and everything. And that night he broke into his mother's house and actually jumped on me there at his mother's house. And his mom called the police and had him arrested. I stayed there for probably about a week, and then was so afraid of him getting out that I left. I thanked his mom and his sister for helping me, and I took off with a girlfriend of mine, and she let me stay at her place. So I stayed with her for a few months. She worked. I watched her son while she worked, so it saved her money, and she let me stay there. And then when I was about 7 months pregnant, I finally decided to call my grandmother, who lived with my grandparents lived with my parents, and I told them I was pregnant. And my mom got on the phone and asked where I was, and they came and got me. And that was the last time that I saw him. So I have a beautiful 27-year-old daughter. And the reason why I say the mental abuse was the worst was to have somebody, and a lot of people don't, there are a lot of people that don't understand this. For one, my husband now he can't wrap his head around it. Why people just don't leave. Well, when you have somebody constantly tell you that nobody loves you, nobody is going to love you more than them, that you're never going to be anything day in and day out, you start to believe that. So you stay because you're actually afraid to leave. So my daughter was born, and put myself through school, became a cosmetologist. I did hair, nails. It was something that I loved to do at the time. Of course, working with people, talking with people, being their confidant, during, getting their nails done or hair done. A lot of them would come back every week, every 2 weeks to come see me. And during that time, I had met my ex-husband, and we dated for a while. And then he asked me to marry him. Well, red flags started popping up, and I think I was still in that mindset that, okay, this guy wants to marry you. This is it. And it was probably, I think my daughter was 5 when we got married. And when I say there were red flags popping up, he was cheating on me right before we got married. And I chose to ignore it because in my head, I felt like I was never going to find anybody else. Ended up getting married, and he just always kept tabs on me. If I was at work, I'd have to go straight home from work, and it all just started again. The mental abuse, the comments that I was too fat or too this or too that, or why. Then I'd start to lose weight. Well, why are you losing weight? Who are you seeing? And it was crazy. I ended up pregnant with my son. Of course, I didn't leave. And he was still cheating on me. And he came home one night. My kids were with my parents. And he came home one night, and I confronted him about some women's jewelry that I found in his luggage, and it wasn't mine. And things ensued, and he said that he found it or something like that. And I knew deep down, I knew in my heart that that wasn't the case. And we actually got into a physical altercation. He hit me literally so hard, he bruised my ear and my head behind my ear and left his handprint around my throat. He left. The neighbors upstairs heard the fight, and they called the police. So I called my mom, and that was it. He was done. He was out of the house. My mom, stepped in and said, no, this isn't happening. It was also a tough time for me because a couple months after that, while we were starting to go through divorce, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. She had mesothelioma, and it was very aggressive. After I kicked him out of the house, I was working, and I put myself through school to become a medical assistant. I figured I'd get a job in the medical field and help people. And straight A student, I loved what I was doing. I got my phlebotomy license, and I was happy. I had my daughter, I had my little boy, and then, like I said, my mom was diagnosed with the cancer. So while I was working, going to school, raising 2 kids, I was also helping my father with my mom, taking her to her appointments and everything else like that. Her cancer got so aggressive that she was walking in her backyard one day afternoon, and we were supposed to go over there and see her, and her femur split right in half. The cancer just ate through her femur bone. It had spread to her bones. So she was in and out of the hospital. They put a steel rod in her leg, and I was always trying to keep her spirits up. So she just wouldn't sit there and waste. She wanted to go back to work. And right before, after the school year started that year, of course, she couldn't go back to work. She had passed away. I had actually moved closer to home. and was busy moving. And I called my dad the one day and I said, I'll be over tomorrow to see Mom. I got the house all unpacked. Everything's done. I'll be by so I can spend all day with her tomorrow. And he said, okay, I'll let her know. Well, we got finished early and my one girlfriend said, why don't you go see your mom? I'll stay with the kids. So I went and I saw my mom. And when I got to her house, she was sleeping on the couch and a couple of the neighbors were there. And something inside of me just knew. I knew she wasn't going to be around long. So I went home and we got up the next morning and my dad called and said, hey, your mom's up. She's doing good. She's actually in the bathroom brushing her teeth. She feels really good. Are you guys going to be over soon? And I said, yeah. Not 20 minutes later, he called and he said, you need to get over here now. She's back in bed and I can't wake her up. She was still breathing. Here she had just went right into a coma. I still regret not going and spending the day before with her while I was moving because I never got to talk to her. She passed away that night. I was the only one left in the room with her. Our neighbors took my dad out of the room to get him something to eat. And I remember telling her that I promised her that I would take care of my dad and take care of my kids. And it was okay if she wanted to go and she died. And I think the hardest part for me was the fact that I was almost out of school. I was CPR certified and she had a DNR. So I couldn't even try to do anything for her. That was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever had to go through. And then after that, I was helping my dad out and he was helping me with the kids. I was still going through my divorce. And a month and a half after my mom passed away, my stepdad was out with friends and he came home. In fact, it was the night before New Year's Eve and he fell down his basement stairs. He suffered multiple skull fractures, severe head trauma. They actually said that his alcohol level is what saved his life because it slowed down his body functions. I got the call. I rushed to the hospital, and once again, I was living in a hospital. Was the same hospital where my mom had been. So I knew a lot of the nurses and they checked on me and they were just very helpful. That was a journey. I was finishing going through school, working, and then going to the hospital every day to see my dad and take care of him and whatever he needed to have done with his house and take care of his house. And I graduated from school. At that time, he was just getting out of a nursing home because he went from ICU. He was in ICU for 4 weeks. And then he was transferred to the brain rehab unit at Metro. And that was hard because I didn't know if he would ever be normal again. He had no current memory at the time. He remembered everything from his past. And I would go in to see him and he'd tell me that he went fishing that day or he went to work and he never left the hospital. And then when he started to come more and more around, he would call me by my mom's name. My mom and I look a lot alike. And the nurses would have to be, no, this is your daughter, Julie, And then he would tell me stories that my mom was down the hall, that he was in the hospital too, that I don't know where he got, that he was in a car accident. And, she was right down the hall and he wanted to go see her. Well, that's when we had to tell him the whole story about her passing away. So we had to kind of relive that again. But he's good now. He's a little bit slower and a little bit different, but he still has a heart of gold. And I graduated from school, and when I graduated, I had to take care of him. He was not allowed to be left alone. He didn't want a 24-hour nurse stranger at his house, but somebody had to be there with him for 24 hours a day because he had a feeding tube, and he wasn't steady or stable on his feet, and they were afraid of him falling, but he wanted to come home. So I wasn't working. I was pretty much taking care of him and trying to raise my 2 kids. And finally, my divorce had been final. And it was just like a whirlwind of events. Finally, when he was good enough, the doctor gave him the okay to be home by himself. I didn't want to be in the medical field anymore. Because literally when I was with my mom, I was in the hospital every day. With my dad, I was in the hospital every day. And I think it just took a toll on me, and I needed a break. So I've always been in the restaurant and bar business, so I went back to that. And of course, even though I was divorced, I was not through with my ex-husband because of our son. And the mental abuse, the verbal abuse was still going on at that time. It was saying that I was never home and I didn't take care of the kids. And, it was always an argument that, I was always working. Well, I was always working because I had 2 kids to support. He wasn't supporting me. My daughter's father, we found out, was actually killed 2 months after my mom passed away. So of course he was never around anyways. So it's been rough. Trying to raise 2 kids, trying to keep them on the straight and narrow off the streets while I'm trying to work 2 and 3 jobs to support them. And it was probably 2015. I took a look at myself one day in the mirror, and I did not like what I saw. I saw somebody who was just tired and beat down, and I didn't know who she was. I was very overweight. I was about 240 pounds, and I hated life. So a good friend of mine, she's a professional bodybuilder, and she said, why don't you join a gym? It'll help you feel better. It'll release some of that stress. And I was too ashamed to go to a gym because I was overweight. I didn't want people looking at me. So I started working out at home, and she had given me exercises and stuff to do at home. And I changed my eating, and I just started losing weight. And all these people start asking me, hey, what are you doing? You look great. And my one girlfriend told me, she said, you know what? She's like, you really caught on quick. You have something. She's like, why don't you go to school to be a personal trainer? She's like, you like helping people. And she's like, you're doing great. So I went back to school, still had my 2 kids at home, working 2 jobs, and I put myself through school. Ended up getting my certification and just kind of stonewalled from there. And that's around the time that I think you and I met. Was right when I got done with school. And that's when I pretty much started my personal training life with you. Learning the things about the gym and how to connect with people, how to talk to people. And I finally fell in love with something. And then more and more, I think I started to fall in love with myself because I figured out what I really love to do. And I've been doing it ever since. I actually ended up getting on stage and competing. I did a transformation show in Connecticut. That was 2017. And then I just loved the atmosphere so much and the people in the business that I decided to do my first show. And we trained a lot for that. And during that time, I became a manager at a gym. I was actually running between two gyms helping people, had great clientele, and did my first MPC show. And that was an experience that was fun. My kids were great support. My son would hide snacks and stuff from me so I wouldn't eat certain foods that I love. And after that, I wanted to do another show. And in 2018, October 2018, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And the funny thing was, I found the lump at the show that I did in 2017. But I didn't feel sick. And when I did my reverse dieting and everything, I had put weight back on. So I'm like, it's nothing. It's probably just from, the hard dieting and the training. And, I felt fine. And I'm that type of person who, if I'm not sick or I don't feel like I'm dying, I don't go to the doctors. You have to make me go to the doctors. I have to be in serious pain to go. So how it happened was I was talking to one of my clients, and she had asked me, she's like, did you ever have that lump looked at? And I said, no. I said, but I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not sick. I feel good. I'm getting ready to do another show. And she looked at me and she said, I will never train with you again unless you go to the doctors. That did it. So I ended up calling the doctors and they got me in, and it ended up being breast cancer. I still tried to train. In my crazy head, I was fine. There was nothing wrong with me. So going through chemo, I would actually try to hit the gym like I was training for a show, and I would be down sicker than a dog 3 days after that because I was just beating my body up so bad. Went through the chemo and the radiation. It was tough. I do have, it's HER2 negative, HR positive, and it is metastatic breast cancer. So I do have the possibility of recurrence within 5 to 10 years of my diagnosis. So every day I'm still fighting. I'm stubborn. I don't like taking a lot of medications. I'm supposed to be taking, it's called tamoxifen, and I don't take it. I chose not to take it because the side effects are awful, and it can actually cause uterine cancer. So why would I want to take something that's going to prevent me from having breast cancer if it could possibly give me uterine cancer? So I was saying earlier that I was talking to the one young lady when we were talking about people, I'm losing my words, people that are bad for your life, people, the negative energy people and stuff like that. And I had thought about it for a little bit, and she helped me out a lot when I was going through cancer. She'd help with the kids or bring dinner or something like that. And I said, I'm always going to be here for you to help you. She calls me mom, and she is like one of my daughters. And I said, that's why I'm still here. That's why I was given this second chance at life again, because I still have purpose. There's still more that I need to do. There's still more lives that I need to touch and change.
You absolutely do. I want to back up a little bit. If I heard you correctly, when your mom was passing,
Mm-hmm.
she gave her last breath to you?
Mm-hmm.
And she passed after you told her that you were okay and you would make sure that her husband was okay.
Yeah.
I think the most precious thing anybody could ever give somebody is their last breath. So I don't know why the guilt is still there, because you kind of gave her permission to move on and to leave a place of pain, because she was in pain, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You also mentioned that people are quick to say, especially when it comes to situations of abuse, why didn't you leave? And, there's actually a syndrome, and I'm not sure if it's Stockholm syndrome, but there is a syndrome. And it's very common, and you get so the emotional attachment somehow to the abuse you become intertwined with it. And it's like you don't even recognize it happening. And then oftentimes, and I don't know the exact statistics, but people who are in abusive relationships, they generally end up back in an abusive relationship because that becomes their normal. So what I want to ask you is what's your relationships like now? Are you, I'm interested to find out, since you've done this work, since you've done some self-discovery, since you've had a chance to invest in yourself and love yourself and understand that you have a purpose. Are you currently in an abusive relationship?
No.
Talk a little bit about your relationship that you have today.
My husband now, it's crazy. We actually dated when my daughter was 2. He is 19 years older than I am. So when we dated, he was, I think, 42, and I was just in my 20s. So, but my parents loved him. He is a retired police officer. And the only reason why we didn't work out back then, and it really wasn't the age difference, because he's actually older than my mom was because I have an uncle, my stepfather's brother, who was also on the police force and also prejudiced. Now, both of my children are mixed. So he started actually causing trouble for him on the police force. And he had been with that unit since he started. And I wasn't going to be the one to make him lose whatever he would have gotten retirement down the road. So we just kind of separated. When I was going through cancer, he was actually in town for his father's funeral. His father had passed. And through the years, he had always kept up with my dad. My dad and my mom and him were always friends. He knew when my mom passed away. He came to her memorial service. And he always figured that I was still married. He had gotten a hold of me through Facebook, and he messaged me and he said, "Hey, I'm in town. Can I come see you?" And I said, "Sure." I told him where the gym was, and he showed up. And we started talking, and within the few minutes that were there, he was like, "I never stopped loving you." And I was like, wow. And the reason why that's such a strong situation to me was because at that time, now it had probably been about 3 weeks since I was officially diagnosed. I was dating a gentleman, and we've been together for about a year. And when I told him that I had cancer, he broke off the relationship. And it just crushed me. But then I thought to myself, you know what? If I have to go through this, I don't want to go through this with somebody who's going to be like that. I want to go through this with somebody that's going to be there to support me. And so when my husband now had said those words to me, I said, I was just diagnosed with breast cancer, right? And he said, "Yeah, I know." And he's like, "Look, I have a flight I have to catch at such and such a time. Can I call you when I land in California?" He's living in California at the time. I said, sure. I figured he lives in California. Nothing's going to happen to this, but he's familiar. We never had like a bad, relationship or anything like that. Why not? So we started talking, and through my treatment, he would fly back and forth in and out of Cleveland to go to treatments with me. And during November, I had seen him in October. During that November, he had talked to our neighbors, my parents' neighbors, they're jewelers, and he told them, he's like, and he asked my dad, old-fashioned way, asked my dad if he could marry me and everything. And my dad's like, what took you so long? So that's like the big, huge joke, because it took him almost another 20 years, So he was like, I want to get married, blah, blah, blah. So here I am trying to go through treatment. I was still working and training my clients during the time. And my clients were great, but I think sometimes they're trying to use my treatments to get out of coming and having me train them, because they would text me, how are you feeling today? Are you okay? And I would even go in there on days that I did not feel good. My bald head had on my bald head, and I would be putting them through workouts. And my one client, he looked at me the one day and he's like, I'm only doing this because you're here and I know you don't feel good. So I had a lot of, great support through them. And I was also trying to plan a wedding. And he asked where I wanted to get married. And I said, I want to get married on a beach. So that's what we did. I went through 6 rounds of chemo in 2 months, and then went through aggressive radiation. I went through 30 rounds of radiation in 5 weeks. I had radiation every day, 6 days a week. I got 1 day off. And I was married a week later. And it was a little bit of adjustment because he is old school. Like I said, he's 19 years older than I am. And he didn't want me to work when we first moved, because I moved out to California, and he didn't want me to work. He said, you've been through a lot. Your body's been through a lot. I want you to rest. You're always taking care of people. No more working 2 and 3 jobs for you. You're going to live life. Now, coming from somebody like me who's used to working 2 and 3 jobs, going from 4 in the morning till 11, 12 o'clock at night, getting back up and doing it again, that's a hard piece to bite off. So we had our problems when we were first married. I did not want to sit down and rest. And so finally he gave in and he let me go to work. So I worked. I was managing a massage envy studio in California, and the pandemic struck. So then when that happened, he said, you're absolutely not working. I don't want you to get sick. Well, actually last February, I got pretty sick, and I'm pretty sure I had COVID. I was in bed for 3 days. My cancer treatments didn't even make me that sick. I was sick. I went probably about a month or so after being in bed sick, and where I just didn't have energy. So we've moved to Las Vegas, and pandemic, of course, is still going on. And I've tried to sneak out and go for job interviews because I just want to be out there. I want to help people. I want to be around people. And he said, no, do it from home. So that's what I'm doing. He has a body shop. He restores classic cars and flips them and does body work for people and fixes cars. And he gets up every day and is out the door by 9 and gets home about 7, 8 o'clock at night. And I'm like a 50s housewife. That's how I feel sometimes. I was like, man, no wonder the women in the 50s went nuts. Only I don't have kids running around. I have our dog. So yeah, it's been different. It's been different, but I think this has allowed me to kind of develop more and enjoy life. I fly my dad out here. I see my kids. I've been home once. I plan on going home again this spring to see everybody this summer when it's a little bit safer for me to go. And that, that's about it. It's good. I have somebody that I can take care of, and I know that in return is going to take care of me. And that's it.
If you were to think back and you could come up with one defining moment where everything changed, when would that moment be?
I would say relationship wise, in me being more careful and more caring about myself and how I let other people make me feel. I would probably say around the time my mom passed away.
If there was a time when did you begin? Was there a moment that you can pinpoint where you began to care more about yourself and knew that it was time to change?
Yeah, that day that I looked in the mirror and I hated the way I looked.
So you looked in the mirror, you hated the way that you look, and you decided to take an action, and that kind of changed things?
Yeah.
Is it safe to say that at that moment you decided that you were no longer going to be a victim and you were going to take charge of your life?
Yeah, because that's pretty much what I did. The minute if I would go on a date or something with somebody and I would just get a feeling or there just even be a shadow of a red flag, I was out of there. Done.
Because I think that's kind of how it happens for all of us. We come to that moment of clarity where we decide that we're no longer going to be a victim and we're going to take charge of our lives again and we're going to be back in control. And from what I got from your story is that you went through this period of time where you didn't really know yourself. You were lost. You met this young man. He pretty much took you on his journey. You survived that. Again, you met somebody else, you married him and allowed him to take you on his journey. So you were just kind of along for the ride, and whatever happened because it appears like you love deeply, which is fantastic. But you didn't really know who you were. And then one moment you had a moment of clarity where you were able to look in the mirror and actually see this perception of you that you didn't like. You decided that the journey was going to be your journey and you were going to be in control. You decided to start working out. That working out led to you deciding to become a personal trainer. That led to you doing a show. All of these actions were feeding love into you. You were learning to love yourself. You were finding these identifiers to help you to understand who you were. Consequently, you reconnected with the gentleman that you knew years ago. You were in a position where you were ready to be loved, and here you are. Is that a good summary of what happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you still in California?
Vegas now.
So life is completely different for Julie Casey than it was 15, 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah. And it's kind of funny because I've always said, and you can ask anybody that knows me, when I was back home, I worked at the one bar that I worked at. I was there for almost 10 years. And you can ask anybody in there. I would always say, because I just love Las Vegas. It's just so beautiful. I always said, one of these days I'm going to live in Las Vegas. I don't know how. I would tell my kids that. And here I am.
And that's the way that I think life happens, is that we come to these moments where we decide what we want. We put that into the universe. Our job isn't to figure out how it's going to happen. But once we put that energy out there, it always comes back to us. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes people wonder about what they're going to do or how it's going to happen. But we only can see how things happen when we relive them backwards. We can't see how they're going to happen in the future. Like this journey that you've been in to where you eventually discovered who you were probably wasn't anything that you could have even imagined, but yet here you are. So what does life look like for you 5 years from now? What do you want to be doing?
5 years from now? I would love to have my own gym in a building, not my backyard, because it does get cold here. It does get cold here. And he has already told me once he gets his shop up and established that is something that we are going to do. He's not at all into fitness. I mean, 70 is knocking on his door. I just turned 50 and 70 is knocking on his door. So, yeah, he's not at all. He's a grease guy under cars. So, but he says that he's going to make that happen for me. And I don't want it to just be a place where where they just come to work out. I want it to be a place where people can come and heal and find themselves and have happen what I had happen, just fall in love with themselves.
So you fell in love with yourself. Not only do you love yourself, you fell in love with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely amazing. What message would you leave people with on how they can also fall in love with themselves?
One of my biggest things is to stop being so negative about yourself. Stop talking negative to yourself. That's one of the biggest things. I'm trying to teach my kids that. My kids are doing great. They're back home. My daughter's staying with my dad. She's working. My son has his own apartment, full-time job. They're great, but there's still things that I would love to see them do. Because my son's a homebody. He's an introvert, but when he's out, he can be an extrovert. So he can switch it up, and he has a very powerful and positive mindset. When I was going through cancer or whatever, if I had a bad day, now he's 6'7", so I come up to maybe his belly button, but he would pat me on top of the head and be like, "Mom, it's going to be okay. We're going to be fine." So he's my positive one. But just stop talking so negative to yourself and show up for yourself every day. Even if you have a job that you have to show up for, you're not showing up for the job, you're showing up for yourself. You have to look at each of those things as kind of a stepping stone to where for whatever path you're taking. So, and it's instead of, like I said, instead of just showing up for the job, don't just show up for the job, show up for yourself, whether it's to become more knowledgeable in whatever you're doing, even if it's just because you're trying to make that money to get to go do something else to better yourself, whatever. Show up for that. You might even hate your job a little bit less.
Yeah, and I think another question I want to ask you, and I'm always fascinated with people's answers, the abuse that you went through, the self-identity stuff that you went through, how did it not turn into pain, but a reason for you to love people more? How did that happen?
I think it all still goes back to the negative talk. There's just toxic people, and they're that way because that's all they know is negativity and bad, and there's good in everybody. I see good in everybody. Even when I was getting beaten down, somehow I saw good in that person, because I knew when he was sober, he was a totally different person, and that was a person that I loved. So there's something good in everybody, and I truly believe that everyone is put on this earth for a reason. So, I mean, yeah, with everything that I could have gone through, that I went through, I could have just held a grudge against every man in the world, but I didn't. There's reasons. They didn't like themselves. So instead for them trying to like themselves, they just figured, I'll get her not to like herself too. You know the saying, misery loves company?
But it didn't work.
And that's what it is.
And that's the beauty. And that's one of the things that I've always liked about you, is ever since I've known you, you've always been about helping other people. That's one of the things I've respected about you, that even with everything that you've gone through, it's always been about showing love to other people. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I actually realized that this whole concept of conversations with love stemmed from a conversation that me and you had And we ended up doing a version via video. So you actually helped birth this whole concept of Conversations with Love, because I was so fascinated with the idea of how much you had gone through and how loving of a person you are. I commend you for that. I applaud you for showing up for every experience that you went through and how you learned and reinforced the lesson that was already instilled within you. And that is, it's all about love. So thank you for that. The world thanks you for that. The world thanks you for that. And because you're here, the world is a better place, and I'm sure that it will continue to be a better place. I thank you for spending time. And I say this every episode, time is the most valuable commodity that we have. This moment right here will never exist again. These circumstances of my day and your day, and the energy that I have and the energy that you have will never be duplicated. So this moment right here, I appreciate you sharing it with us and growing with us. And I can't wait to see what 5 years looks like. Because if it's anything like the last 5 years, it's going to be a journey.
I hope it's an easier one. I'm getting a little tired.
Well, it's kind of like working out. When you first start working with 20s, it's hard, but after a couple of weeks, you can work with the same 20s and it's not that hard. So,
Hard.
I don't think it'll ever be as hard as it is right now, because you have the ultimate tool, and that tool is self-love and self-knowledge. And you have a great history of being able to maneuver through things. So I think you'll be all right. But once again, I want to thank you, Julie, for spending this time with us. And I hope that the rest of your day is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Conversations with Love with Eric Shawn.